Right, okay, thanks very much for joining us today. We don't have a Ruth, but what we do have is Anne. Anne is joining us from the evenings that we used to have at sort of between 6 o'clock and 7. So Anne's come over from that. So what I am going to do is we're just going to find out if there's any news today that is to do with archaeology. And any news today from the Barron district over to and you wouldn't have any news from the Barron district. So Kate, any news you'd like to tell us from the Barron district this week?
Well, it's too early. Don't get it till tomorrow.
No, this week. Oh God.
No, there's no real news except a bit of satisfaction. A builder came to give me a quote for some work, and I was telling him all about the burials and all the archaeology there is around here. And he was gobsmacked and amazed and couldn't wait to tell his wife.
Oh.
People love it. People love it.
Yeah.
They do. We should get more of them watching online. Exactly. So right. What else now? Okay, Peter, any news from you this week?
No.
Right, okay. I need somebody to give us some news. Kathy, any news you'd like to share with us this week?
No, I haven't got any. Sorry.
Right,
Hi, Kathy.
Because I'm still doing a couple of things in the background. I just want to know, Richard, give us 2 nuggets for a minute whilst I'm getting things set up.
Nothing much I know of has happened this week.
You've got to give us some news, Richard. Otherwise my life will end.
I haven't got any news. I can't think of anything.
There was a good program on last night about, Skarma. He's good. He's back on.
Don't you mean Sharma? Sharma, not Skarma.
Skarma.
No,
Skarma,
Sharma.
the historian or whatever his name is.
It's called Sharma, not Skarma.
I said anyway. He was talking about, basically a lot. It was about Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn and all that, but it was Cromwell really that he was, really pointing at, and how influential he was in all that, and it was him really was getting decapitated. And what do you think?
Horrible little man. Hasn't he got a horrible little man face?
What?
He does.
I think
Cromwell.
What's his name? Simon.
Oh, Cromwell.
Oh.
Yeah, it was that where we had a series on, didn't he? Wolf Hall. That was very good.
Oh, he was much better looking than the real Cromwell.
Yeah.
Oh, did you know him?
No, the portraits. The portraits are famous. What's his name did the portraits? The Tudor portraitist.
The big question Pete wants to know is if you actually painted any of these things. Right. Okay. So I'm glad we've actually we are a little bit late today, simply because I think everybody's going to accuse me of either not telling them that we were starting at 11 o'clock, but 11 o'clock is going to be the new time. So we're well and truly started. We'll go until 12:30. And then we'll call it a day. Now, I promised that we were going to be looking at a little bit of the cambrensis, and we've got one from 1930, and we've got another one from, I think the other one here is the one that we're going to refer to. This one is actually from 1933, and in fact, I do have a much older cambrensis over here. Which I want to show you.
I don't know what this class is. I thought I was doing the line.
Actually, I can't get out the box, but I've got an archaeocambrensis over there from 1876. I've got a metal box there, a metal army box from the Second World War that seems to lock and only seems to want to open when it wants to. So today, to start off with, what I'd like to do is completely ignore the Roman stuff. Right, and we're going to go to basically the end of the Roman period. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 2 books the Barry Centenary book, and we're going to use this wonderful book, South Glamorgan Heritage. Now, both of these books are published around the same time. Obviously, the Barry book comes out in 1984, and our book, South Glamorgan Heritage, came out in 1985. And in fact, the information from Barry in the Barry book and the information from South Glamorgan Heritage has more or less completely changed in the space of a year, simply because there were a lot of discoveries being made in the Barron District area in the 1983, 1984, 1985 period. So, you know, we got updates in this publication. But I think the course of writing and how people describe Barry in a certain period that I want to look at today is this period after Rome, the Roman era. Now, some interesting things. The medieval period, darkness and enlightenment, the Dark Ages, AD 450, AD 1100. So basically 1100. So that's rather interesting. That's rather interesting that I've got some echo in there. That's rather interesting that, in fact, that they've got the end of their Roman period in 450, which is quite learned from 1985. My end of the Roman period is 473, which is the end of the Roman Empire in the West. And but the two ways they've got describing this period in Barron districts is the one title in the Barry Centenary book discusses this as being Celtic saints and early Christianity, right? So that's the sort of post-Roman period all the way up to the arrival of the Normans in the area sometime in the 1090s, 1100s. So that's how they describe it in the Barry book. And in this here, in our South Glamorgan Heritage book, they describe it as the medieval period, darkness and enlightenment, the Dark Ages. I never call it the Dark Ages, but this is what regular muggles in the streets call it. So we'll just call it that for now. But for me, it's like this. For me, the post-Roman period, which is actually not 473, 476. I've got to correct myself there. 476 with the last Roman emperor, Romulus, and that period from 476 all the way to roughly 1090. And what we've got in the Barry book is a little bit of a mention of some activity going on at the Glanamore site. We've got a mention of Landock, and in the other book that we've got, the medieval period, this one, we've got a little bit of a mention, I do believe, again of Coldnap and Dinas Powys and Landock. But I would like to interject that we've got an image here of the building that they feel was built on the remains of the Roman site at Glanamore using building material, which we can actually show you now quickly. So there we go. Now, it's not an image that we come up with much, but that is the stone building that's roughly dated to about the 800s, 900s, built directly on the ruins of the Glanamore Roman site. And interestingly enough, this week, I have actually finally done my little bit on the Roman site at Glanamore after we've got the 95th column in the Barron district this week. So we've done 95 entries in the Barron district over 2 and a bit years. So I've decided to leave this Roman one to a day when I'm really struggling, and because the Barron district had put their when they need material in the Barron district forward by about 3 days, I thought, oh God, what have I got an image of, and what can I write about that's from the heart and get it over to the Barron district for this week? And I thought, right, it's the one that Kate set me up to do. So thank you very much for Kate. And interesting enough, the remains of this sort of Dark Age, early medieval building, period of Enlightenment building from the period of 476 to 1090 no longer exist, because all that rubble there, all that rubble there is the rubble that they needed to remove to actually find the wonderful Roman site of Glanamore, because archaeology is destructive. So to try and get the Roman site below, they had to move all that. But that's the reconstruction down there, which is not an image that you see much of. I like that image, and I've only ever seen that image in this book, the South Glamorgan Heritage. That's when South Glamorgan was actually a county and not the modern unitary authority. Right. So what I'd like to sort of illuminate a little bit is that when we look at this early medieval period, immediately what we do talk about this immediate post-Roman period, what we do think of is Llancarvan, which we mentioned last week. And in fact, there was a little bit of an update in my archaeologia cambrensis from 1876 in the locked box, which unfortunately I can't open. But it's got this weird locking mechanism, an anti-tamper mechanism for people who can't get the ammunition out. So sorry, I can't get that, but naturally we'll look at that next week. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about what the Barry book says about this period that we're actually talking about. One thing I'd like to show you is this image here. That's the reconstruction image. That's one reconstruction image showing the Glanamore site, which is actually in the Barron district tomorrow, isn't it? One reconstruction shows this building as having a flat top, as actually being a signal structure. But what we're talking about is that I do believe, if I'm right in working this out, the site, the Dark Age site, was actually early medieval site, was actually here in this area, built out of the ruins and on top of the stones of this site. So actually, the reconstruction is when we think about the reconstruction, this site from about 800-900 years AD. You should actually add loads of bits of wall sticking out as well. It looks a bit sort of it looks a bit Persal, right? So these stones come from a building, and bits of the Roman building would be still sticking out. We know that, Kate, and the reason why we know that is because when they were excavating, they actually found out that lots of the walls in the lower part towards the seaside had actually been mobbed out. So that must mean that people in the medieval period, which is after the period of this building from the 800-900s, the proper medieval, the higher medieval period from the 1100s, they must have thought, oh, right, there's stones sticking out, we're going to dig them out. So that means, in absence of evidence, that, in fact, that reconstruction drawing is wrong, because people in the medieval period years later knew that there was stone there, because they could actually see them sticking out on the surface. But obviously, the building is what we're interested in regards to sort of the sense of reconstruction. So what we're going to do is we're going to read a little bit more from the Barry book. It says the ending of the Roman period in Britain early in the 5th century. You know, I don't like that when people say the 5th century and 4th century and 3rd century. What I always do is I round them up to the actual hundreds. So the 5th century is the 400s. So we'll go on as we mean to continue in the 400s. This heralded a new era, called by some historians the Dark Ages, and by others the early medieval period, and by others the early Christian period. It continued in Wales up to the Norman invasions of the 10 and 1100s, thanks to the work of historians and archaeologists during the last 30 years. So the last 30 years, that's going to be from the actually, this is actually, when it says the last 30 years, this is actually pretty good, because in the 1950s, mid 1950s, Alcock was actually excavating the Dinas power site, finding lots of early medieval Dark Age evidence. So that's a really, really nice date to sort of think about. These major advances have been made in our knowledge of this obscure period. It's no longer an obscure period at all. It's a period of great enlightenment. In fact, when you say the early Christian period, the period of enlightenment, that's what some historians call it. And actually, some historians argue that this period between 476, 410, 450, whatever date you want to go with, the end of Roman era in Britain, they say that actually this period was actually a lot shorter. In fact, the historians have added 200 years onto the dating system. That's a really obscure concept. We're not going to do that today. And in fact, the reason why people struggle understanding this period is over 500 years long, 600 years long, and we don't see a great deal of activity. And some historians have said if you take 200 years off it, it's 400 years long. If you fit all the information into it, it makes it sound better. But we're not going to do that today, because radiocarbon dating evidence and scientific archaeology proves that notion to be completely false, but it's worth thinking about, as I know one of you believes in the flat earth theory, Kate, and that we're not going to argue against it. So the Barry area has itself received attention, notably with the archaeological investigations of sites at Dinas Powys. We've already mentioned that with Alcock at Dinas Powys, Landock with that wonderful carving at Landock. And in fact, I do believe that we do actually have an illustration of that stone in this book's South Glamorgan Heritage, which hopefully I can actually just quickly show you on the screen, if it will stick up and show me. Where are you? Can't find it. Where are you? I can't find the image. Anyway, it's there somewhere. So anyway, back to what I was talking about. So we've got this wonderful carved stone at Landock, and we've got the Glanamore Foldnap, and what we've now got since all of this, even since this site, they were actually, when this site was being worked on and published, like by the Glamorgan Archaeological Trust illustrator David M. Robinson, they were actually working at Biglis, but more importantly, they were working at Atlantic Trade Estate. And a little bit of sort of early medieval evidence from Biglis, that's okay. But what we're talking about, Atlantic Trade Estate, and this didn't actually make it into print at this stage. So we're not going to mention that today, because we mentioned it quite a lot. So we're going to basically primarily base this on what's in these two books. But if we do get around to it, the stuff in Archaeo-Cambrensis is completely different from what we're looking at here. But the stuff in Archaeological Cambrensis, if we don't do it this week, is an investigation into the problems of the sand dune areas of the South Wales coast. And what it basically says is obviously the sand dunes sort of covering archaeology, and that we lose the archaeology in various locations from Pembroke, Carmarthen Bay, and it's got new boroughs here, and it's also got the wonderful likes of Margam boroughs and the Merthyr Mawr boroughs. And this is the Merthyr Mawr boroughs is the one that I'm particularly interested in, to be honest with you. So that's what we might do today, and that might directly link us into some sites that existed in the early medieval period that we no longer can find, because they're under meters and meters of sand. Not the mile of sand that we see at the Sahara Desert, but if you've got 10, 20, 30 meters of sand above an archaeological site, Merthyr Mawr sand dunes, it's basically completely inaccessible. Christianity had reached Britain during the Roman period. I love it when an author says the Roman period, because it helps me out a great deal. Last week, when we looked at we looked at that thing, you know, Caddock, Dyfrig, Caraddock, all being involved with the monastery and the foundation, the establishment of cells and so on in connection with Llancarvan that we mentioned last week. But my sort of subtext is this very thing. Christianity had reached Britain during the Roman period. It's the Roman era that gives us Christianity, not this period of early Christianity that we've mentioned. There is Christianity already here. We can only look at St. Julian's, for example, Julian the Martyr towards Newport, which Anne would be familiar with, the martyrdom of Devon, for example. We're looking at all these different things. All this was happening actually in the late 200s to 300s. So we've established that, and was well established in many places, though there is no direct evidence of its presence in the Barry area. We're not going to go any further with that, but I would say there probably is, because, and the reason why I'm saying because, in absence of evidence doesn't mean to say there's not evidence of archaeology. And what we mean by that is that we have established that there is lots of Roman activity in the Barry area. You only need to look at my original Romans in the Vale of Glamorgan book to realise that out of the 120 pages, there's about 50 pages devoted to Barry. Right, in the later book, the Romans in South Wales, naturally the 150 pages, you've got about 20 pages about Barry, and obviously I've expanded to everywhere else. But that's the point. Because of all this evidence in the Barry area, it simply testates to it that Barry in the Roman era would have 100% been Christian. By about the 380s, the 390s, 400s, because it was part of Roman law. The only religion that could ever exist in the Barry area by the 400s was Christianity. So therefore, everyone was Christian. Job done. So therefore, we're talking about lots of the early establishments of Christianity in the local area are to do with this Roman era, and in fact, it was a controversial statement to make 10 years ago. I remember a certain Mary Beard. She came on television and say, actually, the great legacy of the Roman world in Britain was actually Christianity, and she actually had death threats for saying that. She actually had death threats on Twitter. A notable, well-standing archaeologist, Beard, actually saying, actually, what this is the legacy. Today, I can just say it and not get people throwing axes at my head. So it goes back to this text. Romano-Britain, British Christianity received a severe setback when Rome relinquished control of the British provinces. Interesting that by the 600s, pagan Anglo-Saxons had settled in much of Britain, making it difficult for Wales and southwest Britain to maintain contact with the Catholic mainstream of Christianity on the continent. Interesting that. Can we just refresh that? Can we just refresh that? I know you want to say something, Kate. Can we just refresh that and say that relinquish control? Well, in fact, Rome ceased to exist. So, it didn't relinquish anything because it didn't exist anymore. It's just that what happened is that nobody was waving a thumb at you and saying, Kate, go to church. If you don't go to church, you're going to be shot down with a lightning bolt. Is there anything you want to say, Kate?
I was just going to say that I understand that argument that the pagans would be standing in their way, but everybody was still going by sea all the while. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't seem like it would be that much of a barrier to contact. A barrier to spread, but not a barrier to contact.
The thing is, in many ways, Barry itself is one of those drumlins of sort of this sort of Christian thing that we're actually talking about. When we say sort of drumlin, a mound of this sort of continual presence of something that we doubt. And then Peter can jump in there and say, oh, actually, what we could think about is the likes of St. Barrett's Chapel. How is St. Barrett's Chapel an early Christian cell? But we do know that there was something there. Whether it was a religious site or not, we don't know. But I wasn't going to mention this, but I would just install in this that what we've got at the Atlantic Trading Estate, with the likes of the cemetery, which was excavated with Glamorgan Grant Archaeological Trust in the 1980s, at this time that these books are coming out, well, a little bit later, just a year or so later, they actually found a late Roman era cemetery, and then it continued all the way into this sort of early Christian period, all the way up to about the 1700s. And no doubt, lots of those graves would be from people who followed the Christian path. But we are a bit obsessed by Christianity when we look at Britain, because Kate, go on, jump in there and say that obviously, even though we're told that everyone had to be Christian, I'm sure that lots of people weren't.
Well, that's like today, isn't it? There will always be people who think it's all nonsense, no matter what religion or what era.
Exactly. Do you know what? I made a statement last night, right? And I was very careful to make the statement properly. Obviously, when I'm free flowing in my Tuesday lecture, it's almost as if Pete knows. It's almost as if I've got to fill so much in. Right. Last night's lecture went on for 2.5 hours. Right. And we fitted so much into it. It was like it was like reading a book, and we just fitted loads of stuff into it. I'm sure Pete would agree because he stayed to the end. But one point I made was that when we looked at Thornbury henges up north, there are 3 henges at Thornbury. It's a centre for Druidism, and it's a centre for sort of New Age, sort of paganism.
Oh,
And
God help us.
basically, I shut up, you. Yeah, God help us. But basically, I made the statement, and I said, look, you know, these henges existing 6,000 years ago would have had nobody dressed up in robes as Druids. In fact, Druidism as even the essence of existing, even if Tacitus is to be believed when he mentions the word Druids once in his works in regards to Anglesey, but we've got no other evidence from Druids ever before that or any other activity. So, but I didn't dismiss it completely, and I said, and I'm glad I didn't dismiss it completely, because I basically said, you know, people can believe this, people could do this, they've got every right to practice whatever they want to write. And somebody watched the video last night, and they said, I really enjoyed your video, and by the way, I'm a Druid. And I thought,
sorry.
yeah, I didn't have a titter. I thought, actually, she did watch it, she thanked me for the content, but then she said she's a Druid. If I had completely slated it, she would have said, I hated your video. By the way, I'm a Druid. I'm never going to watch your stuff again. She didn't say that, so it was very diplomatic.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's sort of crack on a little bit more. So here we go. In this situation, distinct forms of Christian observance grew up in these areas of Wales, Ireland, and Scotland, which were naturally different to other observances of Christianity. And it does say that, doesn't it? You know, Christianity's always been cellular. You've got Protestantism, you've got Catholicism, you've got all the other sects of Christianity, and we don't need to go into that. But Christianity has always been rather jarred and split. So we've done that little bit there. I haven't done the full section, but there's not a great deal in the Barry book about this Christian period. But what I want us to do, I want us to go back to South Glamorgan Heritage, and we're going to do this complete section in South Glamorgan Heritage, because what they write about Christianity in South Glamorgan Heritage is basically 2 pages. So we'll just get it on. We'll just do it. I like this image here, which I'm going to show you. A burial that is from the 700s, cut into the demolition deposits of an early Roman villa at Llandoch. The proximity of the parish church dedicated to St. Docdois suggests early Christian activity in the area. And there we go. Now, that is rather interesting, right? And what's interesting there, you've got the paving, and obviously there's a buildup of soil on top of that paving. So the body's been interred there about 700. So what they've done, they sawed a bit of soil, maybe about, I don't know, a foot deep. Underneath that, a bit of rubble. And then they found the paving. So they took the paving out and they put the body in there. But this person may actually be related to the people who actually originally lived at that villa. You never know. And that, again, that's evidence. People did. My history teacher in school said that nobody lived in Wales between the end of the Roman era and the coming of the Normans. Well, I don't know.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
I don't know who he is, Kate, but he's definitely real.
That doesn't make any sense anyway.
No.
But it's this sort of an absence of evidence thing. Back to this again, the Dark Ages from South Glamorgan Heritage, AD 450 to AD 1100. Unfortunately, knowledge of the political and economic history of Wales as a whole during the centuries following the collapse of Roman rule is particularly sparse. Now, I'm always being corrected these days by saying, you know, was it purely Roman rule? Just call it the Roman era, Karl. That's fine. Basically, the Roman era, that's when the Romans felt that they were in control. We'll give it to them. Few reliable documentary sources to survive, and hitherto archaeological evidence has not proved especially enlightening. I would actually disagree with that. You've got beads, you've got gildas, You've got Nennius, you've got all these, you've got sort of the idea of the Mabinogi and the black books of Herogest and all the rest of it based on really early stuff, right? You know, so disagree with that. There's more writing associated with this period that immediately after the Roman era, going into 1066, that actually existed before. So that should be called the Dark Ages. But nobody's going to call the Roman period the Dark Ages because you've got all those buildings. We can, however, be sure that following its introduction to later Roman Britain, so my God, both books agree. Christianity became the overwhelming religious belief in early medieval Wales. Both agree, love it. Indeed, there are suggestions that the final inhabitants of the large villa at Lantwick Major were Christians. Love it. That's the landmice Roman villa. Even so, although there is reasonable documentary evidence from the later part of this period to attest to important monastic foundations in South Glamorgan, Lantwick Major, Llancarvan and Landoch, it is extremely difficult to say when or how far back they were actually founded. There is a reason for that. There is even greater difficulty in trying to assess what such sites mean in terms of physical evidence on the ground. Now, I'm just going to answer that quite easy, right? It's quite an easy answer. When I take people into church graveyards, and I used to do my ghost walks, I used to make this statement, and the statement was, the original church is over there, and I would take them to the side of the church graveyard. This is the example about Merthyr Mawr. There's a stone at Merthyr Mawr, and there's a hole cut into it. This lozenge-shaped stone, right? It's a glacial stone, and there's a lozenge set into it. That's your early church. And people are going, yeah, but this is just a stone. And I say it's not just a stone. Remember, you've got these lay preachers going from community to community with a donkey, right? Which would be an appropriate animal or a mule, right? That's a good representation of Jesus and his early years and all the rest of it, right? In the stable, there you go. So you've got two panniers, one pannier with it maybe a little bit of a missal in it, bit of a small holy book in there in Latin, some provisions on the other side. You've got a bit of wood, and the bit of wood represented the actual holy cross, right? So that bit of wood, about so big, right, would fit into that slot, and that's where he would preach. So in other words, we're not looking for buildings, we're looking for something. Maybe we're looking for a totem pole as well. This sounds a bit strange. Christians having totem poles. You go to early Christianity in Scandinavia, it's totem poles. You mark my words, it is. Early Christianity in Pictish Scotland, carved stones, totems, job done, with a bit of a crude cross on it. Wheel crosses across the Vale of Glamorgan. Look at this one here. That cross itself represented early Christianity and people preaching. So in fact, lots of the authors, what they've done, lots of researchers, what they've done, they've gone out and tried to find physical buildings. And they, we can't find physical buildings, therefore Christianity isn't here. Well, it's not really true, is it? The burials might be an indication of early Christianity. And actually, there's another thing that's wrong as well. When people say, oh, we found a burial, it's an east-west alignment, right? It could be pagan. But if you find organized burials within a certain locality, whether they're east, west, north, south, in this angle or whatever, as long as they're not cremated, it's a sign of Christianity. There you go. A clearer indication of Christian activity is perhaps the collection of tombstones and crosses, collectively Langan as well, known at early Christian monuments, Landoch, Lantwick Major, Langan. You've got various other examples as well. You go to Merthyr Mawr as well. You've got Stones Museum at the back of the church. Over 400 of these stone carvings from early Christian, about 500 are recorded from Wales, with dates ranging from the 400s all the way to the 1000s. So there you go. And include a number from South Glamorgan. Once again, in this area, they are somewhat late and belong to the 10 and it belonged to the 9 and the 1000s, but the one at Landoch, which we're not going to look at today, is in fact incredibly old. It really takes us into the guts and bolts of the end of the Christian world, all the way flowing through into the 800-900s. Beautiful monument. And do you know what? I'm fiddling about with this book, and I'm still trying to find this image because I know there's an image of it in here. Hang on a minute. Let's just see if I can find it. Come on, Blow. Where's this image? I do actually have the image of the Landoc Roman villa, mind. So there we go.
Hmm.
That's an image of the Landoc Roman villa before it's demolished,
Mm.
right? And there, at that site, is actually one of the burials that we've actually saw earlier on. So you know. Anyway, back to this. Let's just get to the end of this. And I did actually want to do just 1 hour today. So we got 28 minutes to go, and Annika Rice is going to jump out of the plane and see if I'm completed. Right. Wouldn't I just? So anyway. Oh, hang on, I've gone to the wrong page here.
I've got Annika Rice challenge game here.
Yeah. Oh God, Anne, don't go there. You're gonna have Pete getting. He's gonna start to moan again now, Pete. So don't let him do it. Don't, please. Further important information on Christianity has been recovered from excavations at Landoc, and when this was published, right, the Landoc excavations of 1990. Oh God, my mum was in hospital. This is 1993. No, it wasn't. It was 1994, I think it was. Yeah, it was 1994. My mum was in hospital, right? And I got off the bus, and there was an archaeological excavation at the back of Landoc Church. So I spent an hour there. Oh Christ, I thought I had to see my mum in hospital. So I then went to see my mum. My mum said, "You're late. You'll have to go soon." And I said, "Sorry, mum. I've just been looking at skeletons." She wasn't too impressed. But there was an excavation there in 1994, and it was by the Guy Holbrook, is one of the guys from Time Team, Cotswold Archaeology. He was there. And Barbara was actually on the excavations. Our Barbara.
Oh.
So they found over 1,000 sets of human remains there, but obviously that's not in this book. But before that, they are talking about other skeletal remains being found at Landoc. Early Christian remains being found at Landoc, so it's great stuff. So further important information on Christianity has been recovered from excavations at Landoc. We mentioned the villa, we mentioned the church, we mentioned the bodies. A number of skeletons was recovered from archaeological levels overlying a Roman British villa, Landoc, just shown you that, and have been shown by radiocarbon dating to belong to the 700s. Nice. In fact, under that road that goes through Landoc, directly north of the church, it's full of bodies. Except the road was built a bit later, so nobody really cares about that, but don't put any drainage across it. Thus, there are strong hints of a continuity between the former villa and the important Christian monastery known to have existed in the vicinity. It's likely that the people... it's a wonderful story. Dinas Powys, the site at Dinas Powys, excavated by Alcock, Landoc, the Roman villa at Landoc, and then the church. It's all linked. It's all probably linked to the same family. Love it. But again, that's probably about an hour lecture, so we won't do that. On the domestic side, until recently, the only recorded site of the period was discovered at Dinas Powys, but Dinas Powys is place de resistance when it comes to sites in the early medieval period, and it's a continuous occupation at Dinas Powys, all the way from about 400 years BC, all the way into the Roman period, all the way into the early medieval period, a bit of a break, and then into just before those Norman murderers get here, a bit of sort of princely occupation by some of the native princes, and then a Norman landscape. So when excavated, this is the Dinas Powys site. A few small buildings were found to lie within simple defences. I don't agree with that. And were apparently occupied between the 400s and the 600s as like a defensive locality. From the quality of finds recovered, including pottery imported from the Mediterranean, the site has been interpreted as the court of a petty lord or chieftain. Well, a bit like me, really, somebody who's petty. And you, Kate, definitely. A second domestic site of the period is now known from Cold Nap, which will directly lead to from the Barry book. So that's a good lead. Where a small, round-cornered stone building, radiocarbon dated to the 800s, was found to overlie an earlier Roman structure. We know it. Finally, although and we know it from everyone's got, right, can you please buy the Barron District tomorrow? If you all buy 5 copies, they'll keep the Barron District going for a couple more months. And
That'll be done.
if there's a space, actually, Kate, can you get me a copy as well? Good.
Of course.
Because I want to see your image in the Barron District. And by the way, next week, right, we've got a bit of a problem with next week's article, right? There are 2 images going in. There is one by you, Kate, and there's one by Owen Leach going in as well. So, you know, they're both being used.
No,
That's fantastic. It's a very picturesque spot, and there's so many different ways to do it.
Yeah,
mm,
exactly.
I haven't done. There used to be what? Did it say the Balmoral, or did it say what's the name of the other boat? In
Waverley.
that's right. In the in tiles on it, but I wonder if that's gone now.
I don't know. You have to go out and give us a bit.
I'll go and have a look.
Right? Because
Yeah.
I'm actually, Kate, right, you can do a bit of ground research, right? Pick up Richard, right, and go out there, go and try and find these things.
yeah. I'd like to find. Oh, sorry.
Well, actually, Richard, Kathy, Kate, and go there
Yeah.
next week. So,
Thinking I
so
could
anyway,
prob-
yeah,
could-
and you're part of the Barry class now. Get on with it.
Too bad. Your reputation's ruined forever.
Exactly.
Oh, don't worry about that.
Well, there is one good thing about Anne. She hasn't been violated by Pete touching her knee.
Yet.
Finally, although there are indications of Viking activity around South Glamorgan coast, particularly the evidence of place names, we have yet to identify any surviving archaeological sites of such a Norse origin. You bloody what? This is written by the same organisation that 3 years later finds a Viking site at Atlantic Trading State. How bloody ironic is that? So
Mm,
what we're going to do is finally, what I would like to do is just to sort of gently show you these images. Obviously, that's what they were first met with, and they were able to reconstruct that building there. And this is what I would like to discuss now. There is more here, right? And I really want to do it, but I'm just trying to look at time. So I might come back to this a little bit here, but what I've said is that I want to do this bit about the building. It directly goes on to St. Barrett's Chapel, right? And a little bit of a plan of what St. Barrett's Chapel looks like. From that reconstruction, right? And so that building there,
mm,
that's from there, and that's reconstructed from there. Take a little bit of a gander. Right, so what we've got in this building, a very small building, and you can see from the scale, right? So this is in meters. So the space inside, if we go like this, is 4 meters in length inside, which isn't actually a small building, probably just under 4. It's not, that's actually not a small building, really, if you don't put clutter in it. You know how big a room is, Anne, when you've got nothing in it, right? But when you've
mm,
got stuff in it, there you go. So
Yeah.
you've got the interesting things here. Drainage. Very interesting words there. They've got drainage in this building. So a little bit of sophistication and a post indicated. Right. So this is a sketch by Howard J. Thomas, who's also mentioned in my article this week. I've mentioned
Can't
Howard
see
Thomas
it.
this week. Yeah. Anyway, there's this.
Can't
Oh,
see
there
it
we go.
really. But,
Got that?
where's that Barrock's Chapel?
No, this is Glanamore. This is the site
Oh,
of Glanamore.
Where's the site of Glanamore, did you say?
Glanamore is on the Cold Nap. So you go under the bridge
Oh,
yeah.
oh,
It's on
right,
the headland there behind the toilets. So
okay.
again, drain, 4 meters across and a post hole
Yeah.
and indications of a stone wall. So what we're going to do, we're going to read, and interestingly enough, this only just made the Barry book, right? Because if this hadn't have been found, right, the Barry book entry on the early medieval period would have been 1, 2, 3 pages long. In fact, this added an extra page to it, so that's great. So in the Barry, it goes on to say, hang on, let's get the wording right of this. there, I'll read it out in full. In the Barry area, archaeological investigations have revealed the existence of 2 secular settlements of the Dark Age. We mentioned that occurred at Achla. Dinas Powys excavations in the 1950s by Alcock revealed the remains of a fortified settlement occupied from, as we've already said, the 4 to the 600s. While at Glanamore, called Knapp, the remains of a building constructed sometime between AD 830 and AD 950 were found overlying the remains of the Roman building. Radiocarbon dates obtained from samples taken from another part of the Roman building suggest some form of occupation in the 5 and the 600s. Here we go. We'll talk a little bit about Dinas Powys, then we'll go on to Glanamore. I want to do this in context. Over 25 years after its excavation, the Dinas Powys settlement remains the most comprehensively examined and best understood Dark Age site in Wales. I wouldn't agree with that now, because we've got the excavations by Mark Redknapp on Anglesey of Llanbydriogoch on Anglesey, where we've got like an early medieval sort of Viking date type period site, but that's been extensively excavated by Dr. Mark Redknapp on Anglesey. But this Dark Age site at Dinas Powys is in the top 3 of most important sites in the whole of Wales from this period. Dr. Leslie Alcock, in his masterly study of the evidence obtained from his excavation, that's quite a bold statement to make, masterly study, concluded that the site was a residence of a petty king or prince living within a dry stone built hall covered with a thatched or turfed roof. The occupants enjoyed a sub-Roman style of life. So in other words, they continued the idea of Rome in their hearts. Pottery vessels, some probably containing wine or olive oil, were imported from France, North Africa, and Western Asia Minor, as it testified by shards found among the rubbish. The site was defended by a simple bank and ditch located on a steeply sloping spur of high ground. In addition to the pottery evidence, metal working debris included scrap metal and glass. Statue of Lloyd George indicated the existence of a jeweler working on the site, no doubt enjoying the patronage of the prince. So in other words, we've got a high status site, really amazing site at Dinas Powys. This is still Dinas Powys. Iron age making and the working of leather and bones were also noted among the many activities conducted there during the 4 to the 600. Wonderful evidence. The large quantity of young animal bones found within the settlement of Dinas Powys, especially those of pig, led Dr. Leslie Alcock to identify them as tribute paid in kind by the local peasantry to their ruler. These, along with goats or sheep and cattle, apparently constituted the staple diet of the occupants. And then we go on to what it says about Glanamore. So just let's remind us about Glanamore. Again, that's what we're going to look at with Glanamore now. We're going to turn the page. Again, that's what we're going to look at there. And that's what we're going to look at there. My major criticism of the Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust with this site, right, is that they should have made a separate publication that looked at this site, right, instead of getting it lost in the publication associated with the Roman remains. That's my criticism. It should have been they should have done a completely separate work on that. But obviously back then, money was a bit tight in archaeology and other things were going on, but we're not going to go there. So this is what it says about Glanamore, and then we'll mention St. Barracks, and then the last bit about the Barry book, and we'll have to do a bit about archaeology cambrensis next week, probably. With the exception of the Glanamore, radiocarbon dates referred to above, there exists a gap in our knowledge of settlement in the area until the 800s, during the excavation of the Roman building at Glanamore, on the site of the former YMCA hostel grounds. The remains of a dry stone sub-rectangular building were found overlying part of the courtyard and veranda dating to the late 200s. Internally, there were traces of a slabbed floor in which there was a setting for a post to support a roof, presumably of turf or thatch. As well as the paving, Drains were located alongside two of the walls, which we have seen that. Animal bones from the deposits lying on the floor of the building provided the material for radiocarbon dates to be calculated. So obviously we get radiocarbon dates from sort of organic bones, those types of things. Unfortunately, no other finds were made that could be attributed to this period. Unfortunately, pottery is very rare in that period, except when you go to the early period, it's been imported in. It's usually because pottery is so difficult to make, and to get to the right temperatures, you do need a furnace and a kiln. And if nobody's got a local furnace and a kiln, you're basically using wooden bowls, or you're using stone bowls and so on. Or you might be using leather bowls. Leather bowls you could make a leather bowl actually. It remains to mention one other possibility of another site in the local vicinity. Now, this is of great controversy, and we're not going to answer this today. But we go quickly over to St. Barrett's Chapel. And this itself, when you look at St. Barrett's Chapel, when you look over the fence at St. Barrett's Chapel, there's a sign post on the right. When you look over the fence, you've got directly the nave of St. Barrett's Chapel, but directly in front of that nave, there's a little bit of an undulation in the ground, and this is what this is, right? Basically, you've got a square building with some kind of raised area, maybe a drain. Now, this is very debatable what it is. Some people actually argue that that is actually an early chapel at St. Barrett's. Others believe it's actually a structure that is very similar to the one at Glanamore, because the dimensions are very similar as well. The internal area of this one is under 4 meters. The one at Glanamore is 4 meters, around the same scale. Somebody was just about to say something. Nope. Okay. The porch of St. Barrett's, as it's described on Barry Island, may represent part of a structure predating the medieval chapel and adjacent priest's house. And that's basically all that we could say about it, because the work of that was undertaken by John Story, and we really don't know much about the dating evidence that we've got, but we do believe it might date to about the 1000s or earlier, more like earlier. But what we do see is it may not represent a church, because the idea of churches and so on is a very different concept than what happened later on. So what I'm going to do is we're going to accomplish this work today, and we're going to complete this work by reading what the rest of this says in the Barry book about this period. We do have a little bit of time. We're going to do this. So it's primarily visited with this idea of Christianity. The faith was spread in the early days by some remarkable individuals. We know that from last week, St. Caradoc, St. Cadoc, Dyfrig, and so on. They were often skilled in worldly knowledge too, and could exercise great influence on the course of secular events by their force of character and their personal connections. So ecclesiastical church, secular, normal, everyday bods like us. Many stories of their adventures and achievements were emboldened and embodied. I added the emboldened bit, but it sounded good. Embodied in biographies, which were not written down until several centuries after their lifetimes. Miraculous elements were woven in, and by today it is hard to distinguish fact from fable. We know about the fish, St. Barrett's. We won't go there. So the word Lan is a giveaway for early Christianity. Llancarvan, Llanmaes, Llantwit Major, Llandoch, and Llandoch, you got the early church. Llancarvan, early church. We're at Llanmaes, there's an early church there. Llangarn, early church there. Llan, the place of an early church. Llan class and area. This was applied originally to the religious settlement, but later to the settlement which grew up in the vicinity. Llantwit Major is a form of Llan Iltyd Fawr, the principal church of St. Iltyd. So obviously another saint there. This saint had a reputation for a profound knowledge of the scriptures, the classics, and early law. i.e. early myths and legends, were said to have kept a monastic college at Llanfair Major in the 400s. Some say in the 500s, but I'm going to go with the 400s. Another monastic establishment was traditionally sited at Llancarvan, though here the place name is misleading. Nant Carvan that we mentioned last week, Carvan Brook. We mentioned that Nant Carvan, the other name for Llancarvan, Nant Carvan, the place of the Carvan River than a Llan Carvan, but it became Llan Nant Carvan, dropping the Nant, Llan Carvan. We looked at that last week. The founder was St. Caddoc. Or we are said that there was another figure whose name began with an E that we mentioned last week, who told St. Caddoc to actually establish somewhere at Llancarvan. Or Llancarvan was already there. It's likely that there was already. We know that Llancarvan is full of Roman stuff within around anyway. In Breton tradition, Caddoc is said to have been a prince of Glamorgan, and some directly link Caddoc in with the legend and the story. I've got to be very careful when I say legend, because I know there's going to be some Arthurian people watching this, but I've got to say that the story of King Arthur, Caddoc King Arthur, there you go. Certainly, these individuals travelled widely by sea in the West, and dedications of churches to them fall into patterns which could indicate their respective spheres of influence. The name Merthyr Dyfan indicates the shrine of Saint Dyfan, or the martyrdom of Saint Dyfan, the place of the martyrdom of Dyfan, where some of the saints' bones were preserved. There's another bit of the story about Barry and the naming of Barry Island, which we're not going to do that, but what we are going to do. There has been much discussion over the origins of place names of the area. Many of them undoubtedly came into existence in this period, but they are not necessarily Welsh. I know Pete on his journeys on Flatholm would say, you know, the Scandinavians visited Flatholm, and they called it the Flatholm, the Flatholm. But what was the name of? I'd like Pete's input at this at the end, right? What was the original name of Flatholm before it was named by the Scandinavians as Flatholm? Surely it would have a Christian name, because there's a link with St. Barrack, Gadlais, and Caddoc. Scandinavian influence was evident at times. Two islands, as we know, Flatholm and Steepholm, Sterepholm and Flairtholm, have a Scandinavian second element. And we've got the name Kogan, a Danish word meaning a piece of marshland. But me and Richard have sort of dismissed a little bit of that there's any Scandinavian association with Kogan at all. But that's another talk. He suggests that Scandinavians had come not only to raid, but to settle. Interesting. Let's not dismiss that either. Monastic establishments and churches are often mentioned in the lives of the saints, but no tangible remains have been found locally. No doubt buildings were usually made of perishable materials such as wood, wattle, and daub, which would decay without trace, or could easily be cleared away for buildings in stone on the site at a later date. Interesting enough, that idea, wooden buildings not leaving trace, replaced by stone buildings, yes. One curious survival in the Vale of Glamorgan may embody a Dark Age building tradition, the circular pigsty made of dry stones. So as we've got a pigsty type building at Glanamore, and we've got a pigsty type building at St. Barracks, can get that out. This sort of pigsty cellular types of structures, and I know none of you like sort of Star Wars, but if you look at the Star Wars film, you see little cellular buildings on the within that film, which are based on actual religious buildings in the film, which are cellular buildings. So these stone cellular buildings actually portrayed in that film, they're sort of used as the last sort of redoubt of a certain Skywalker. But yeah, these round circular cellular buildings, about 4 meters across inside diameter. You've got a bucket, you've got some food, you might have a missile, one item of clothing, some hay to lie on, and that's it. There you go. But we're presuming these are sort of religious buildings. People may have actually lived in this way. I don't know. The apparent lack of identifiable ecclesiastical sites has long puzzled archaeologists. We'll leave with this one. In a recent study, a possible solution has been offered. The Roman villas at Llanfair Major and Llandoch have yielded evidence that their sites were used as cemeteries in the post-Roman period, an occurrence widely noted elsewhere in Britain, for example, in the West Country. It is tempting to suggest that settlements developed after the Roman period adjacent to the villa sites, and that some of these represent early Christian foundations. The monasteries of persons such as Iltyd or Dochdoi, of particular importance in this context is a recent contribution by a writer known as Wendy Davis, who draws upon documentary evidence to suggest that early monasteries might well have their origins on Roman villa estates. So, and this is what we see in other places in England, like Chedworth. Now, the reason why that would be, and there's a good example of this at Lulligston in Kent. At Lulligston in Kent, what you've got a Christian and a pagan site, a pagan a Temple of Mithras at Lulligston, and above this you've got a Christian sort of. They basically hedged their bets, and they had a little sort of shrine to nymphs. So at Lulligston, what you've got three sort of beliefs practicing at the same time in the later Roman period, but the pagan stuff is below because you didn't want people to know that you're actually still doing the pagan stuff. You're hedging your bets, and it's where Christianity would have become a fad. Basically, what we're going to do, right? The new religion, right? You know, we're going to become Christians, but we're also going to remain pagans. We'll take on Christianity because the Christian pantheon was like we did all gods, and they saw that Christian was actually part of that, but that the official empire said you could only have one religion, but they probably didn't take any notice of that because Christianity was out on the edges of empire here. Villa owners could get away with it, but this is why we're saying that Christianity really blew and grew at places like Llanfair Major and Llandoch, because there was establishing people who had control and power who happened to be Christian at the same time. Early Christian memorial stones bearing inscriptions or carved designs exist, Llanfair Major and Margam, and the stone range in date from the 4 to the 1100s, 1000s. But we cannot dismiss the Urbic cross and the Urbic shaft at St. Dochdoi in Llandoch. It's got the dates here at Llandoch as being sort of for that, the 900-1000s, but I believe we're looking at the late 300s at least. A tiny little image of this, and that's where we'll call it a day. And there we go. Tiny little image, there it is.
Oh,
So if you go into the church graveyard, you head towards the port. Over there on the right, there you've got the Urbic cross. So what we're going to do, we're going to call that a day. I did ask Pete a question. Pete, give me an idea what Flatholm could have been called before it was named by the Scandinavians. Do you know?
Hello, Pete.
Pete, you're asking a question, Pete. Pete, whenever I want Pete to say something, he can't be bloody asked.
Yeah, I was muted. Sorry. Yes.
Pete, just postulate, just the temperate, just give us some ideas. Somebody must have asked. Has anyone ever asked you what the name of Flatholm was before it was named by the Scandinavians?
No.
They bloody should have. Have you got any idea, Pete? What have you got any ideas? Maybe what it could have been, or what are you thinking of?
I'm not sure.
I mean,
Okay.
that is the biggest problem, isn't it? The absence of evidence, because there's so much we know about Christianity, and of course it was Latin, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, they were using Latin, so they couldn't understand what they were saying.
Yes.
It was just symbolism, which was easy to understand. You know,
The Romans removed all other pre-records before them, I believe, thinking they were lies.
Fresh.
It was propaganda and stuff, and they got rid of it.
Can't tell till it turn around, sort of thing.
well, I just don't, we don't know of any language
Yeah, exactly.
or
Missile.
Well, they had a language because they were talking to each other,
yeah, of course they matter. Of course they did.
and they were leaving runes and various
That's right, they
markings
were-
on
Far
things.
too much. It's becoming.
So they
They were
could
speaking
leave a
with,
record,
Mm.
but the Romans believed the records to be false and propaganda, so they destroyed them, I believe.
Hmm.
But again, giving a name to Flato, that's sort of an interesting thing. That obviously before all these other names, there were other names given to them, and it goes for Christian names as well. That what we do find is that Christian names have replaced earlier names. And you know, and Peter's point that, you know, lots of these things were replaced and changed is a good point. Yeah, we'll go with that. Right. So, anything else you'd like to say, Pete?
No, I nodded off there.
Did you?
Sorry about that, but
Oh.
yes, I had.
That's a shame.
My God, that's the first time we've ever had an apology from Pete.
Yeah, I admit I did nod off.
There's video evidence
There's video
online.
evidence. Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tape record that, and every time I'm just going to remind him that he did apologise once. Right. So, okay, then we've done you, Pete. What about you, Anne? Anything you'd like to say?
Well, it is. It's always going to be fascinating, this period, isn't it? Of language, you know, names of places, and I just think that it was just dominated by Rome, I suppose. But,
Yes.
no, I quite isolated. It felt, well, to me, it feels quite isolated, Wales, but perhaps it wasn't, you know. In the Roman world, we had quite a bit of Rome here.
I don't think it was isolated at all. There's a hell of a lot
They
going
only
on,
came
you know?
where there was something that they could steal.
Oh, now come on, Pete. That's a bit extreme.
No, it's
Hang on,
not.
Pete. Hang on,
There
Pete. You
was some-
stole
they
one of
only
our
came to
women. You came
places
from
that were
Cornwall.
useful, where there was materials which they could use.
That's true. That's true.
Yep,
That's true. But
Yeah.
Pete, you did steal one of our women,
I did. Yes,
and you're not even Roman. You're Cornish, so I don't even know how that goes.
Celtic,
I forgot,
please. Yeah,
Pete. And you're a Celt as well. That's terrible.
yes, I'm a Celt. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pete, you fell for that one. You just dove straight into it.
I was going to
Right.
say there's a part of over in Ireland, Northern Ireland, where I go for family. They got drumlins over there. The drumlins, they
Mound.
call them.
Mound. Exactly.
They're sort of mounds.
Exactly.
I suppose they're, I don't know if they're warrens.
Ma-
Are they?
Mounds of evidence.
Hmm.
Mounds of evidence. I've just got news about. I've just got news that a ram is on its way. Oh God, my sheep are going to love that.
Oh, you might be able to.
Oh, you've got to get an OnlyFans channel for that.
So what are you going to do with the lambs?
Well, I got to get my rubber gloves for a start. Right, okay then.
You might get
Uh,
crow's milk. Yeah, you use milk.
It's
Crow's milk?
disgusting.
Right, talking about
Yeah.
crow's milk, talking about old crows. Kate, you need to coordinate going over and getting some. I want some Jen about the pier so I can use in my article, but I've got to do it on Sunday, so we haven't got long. So, Kate, anything you'd like to tell us this week?
Oh, it's all been fantastic, all really interesting, but every lecture there's usually something that really rings a bell, and
Yeah.
that's the traveling priests with their slot to stick their wood in, if you'll pardon the expression. Because I've noticed the bases of these crosses are really ugly, these step things. You'd think,
Yeah.
why didn't they just make something look nicer or make the cross bigger? But that's why, because if you look the way it's made, it's like steps up, and it looks like the cross may well be stuck in a hole in the top. So maybe they just gradually made it higher and higher, and that's why it looks like that with the ugly steps and then the cross on top. I think that's right.
And
Rang my bell.
the Antonine cross, which is actually in St. Bride's, if you go, you've got the church on your left and you drive up to the common, there's this little stone which is quite crude with a slot in it. That's exactly what I mean.
Cool, I know, but that's like these later ones. I'm thinking, I think it's at Sully, and I think at
yeah, there's a lot of
I was
Not
gonna say
Porth
there's one in
Kerry.
Sully Church.
yeah, and Porthkerry.
No,
That's like stepped like that.
Basically,
Merthyr Mawr, it's stepped like that.
basically the
Although the
principle,
cross is stone, it looks like it's representing what they used to do.
the-
Very
the-
cool.
yeah.
the thing is this idea of creating these steps only came in about the 1400s. Up until then, there was just this square on the ground,
Mhm.
like with the.
They've
with
just
the-
elevated it then. It's still it's the line, darling.
just elevated it. Right.
Super.
Anything else? Anything else, Kate? You'd like to say before we go on to the
There
annoying
was
thing?
something else I was going to ask. I'm looking for it now. I made a note.
Right. You have a look for that, and I'll
Okay.
ask Kathy. No, Kathy don't want to talk to us. this
Kathy
week.
falls asleep as well.
Sorry, no, I haven't got any questions.
Right. Okay, Richard. Any questions before we finish?
No, I'm okay. I'm
Right.
happy now.
Give our deepest to Pauline, and I do believe that there was a delivery made in the week of raffle prizes.
Yeah,
And some Anna plants, I do believe, and
Yeah,
that was all
yeah.
thanks to Kate.
clowns. Yeah, it's nice to see Kate.
You're welcome. But do you know what? When you rang me to say you thought I'd left the soup with you,
Oh, yeah.
I thought you were ringing to tell me that I had to come back and take the calendar away.
Uh-huh.
So she's forgiven you the calendar.
Yeah.
Basically, what we're going to do, Kate, if you haven't got anything else, we're going to do a quick raffle.
Oh, just can't wait to see Annie. You're going to come when we're back in the studio. You're going to come down.
Oh, and Anne will be down just to give me a hug.
Well, I was thinking of that.
We'll
yeah,
give you a tour. We'll give you a tour of our local sites by foot. We've got some over there.
Yeah,
But we
I
won't
know
make the same
very
mistake.
well, but not the sites. Probably not the archaeology sites. No.
We
The-
won't make
the
the
medieval
mistake of
lane.
inviting her. Go on.
Yeah, if you go to the studio, I might combine Wales at my trip to Dinas Powys. I keep meaning to do that.
Good. So good. Well, what we're going to do this week, we're going to do a raffle, right? And
Bella Ricky.
basically, Bella Ricky. What a surprise this week, Kate.
Oh no, this is a real collector's piece. It's a brooch, but you could also turn it into a Christmas tree decoration or put a magnet on the back and put it on your. It's a charming representation of our
right, well-
beloved.
Well, in that case, Richard gets 2 numbers this week. So Anne gets number 1, Kate gets number 2, Kathy gets number 3, Richard gets number 4 and 6, and Peter gets number 5. Sorry, Pete, we're not winding you up this week. Right, we just want to laden. Yeah, I got to get a phone call off Pauline soon. We don't want all this stuff, but it's tough. She hasn't made that phone call yet.
Fingers
Right, okay.
crossed for you, Anne.
Yeah, fingers crossed for you, Anne.
Beginner's luck.
Right, okay, now, I just got to find my little device on you, right? And it goes to, do you know when you can't find things on your phone? Where's my little thing? Oh my God, my little thing's not on you.
Oh,
Oh my
It's
God.
random number generator.
Where's my random?
all this
Oh, thanks.
technology.
Oh my, somebody's nicked my random number generator.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to do, I'm going to, this is how we're going to do it. Hey, what we're going to do, Kate, is this
Yes.
acceptable? what we're going to do, we're going to find a number. So the first number, the first digit that we find in here now, right, is the number that's won the prize, yeah?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
On the bottom of the page, here we go. It's there's no number at the bottom of the page. Ruth, we'll do another one. Here we go.
Cheap.
Another one. Hang on, another one. Here we go. It's number 2.
Oh, shit.
So if we take the 2, Kate, you've won the prize.
I won the prize. So it may reappear. You never know. There might be a second chance to win this little
no.
lovely.
Hey, Kate, we got to do it again. I want a boys to win it.
Oh, really?
Okay, go on.
But, okay. Guys, we got to do a I got to get my number because Richard loves this. This. Oh, I found it. Here we go. Random number generator, right?
Woohoo.
Here we go. So what we're gonna do? We're gonna put number 6 in there because there's 6 prizes. Oh, and we're gonna have one for Ruth. She's number 7. So here we go. So there we go. We're gonna press the generation number and we're gonna press generate. It's number 5. Peter's won it.
Yay,
Oh,
Pete.
great.
Well done, Pete.
Oh, well done.
You know what Pete should do? You should drop the prize off at Pete, and then he'll give it to Sandra, and Sandra will tell him to piss off.
Well, I was thinking the next time he dresses up, he can wear this as one of his medals.
Yes.
That would look nice. I can even probably find a bit of ribbon to sew it onto like they do for the
No,
Queen.
thank you.
I don't think he's an
Hard
I
luck.
don't think he's a royalist.
Once
Actually-
you won, that's too bad.
It'll be next week's prize.
Guys, you
Oh,
got
yeah,
to
put it
listen
in
to
for
this,
next
right?
week. Maybe I'll win.
Peter has lots of medals from the days he used to be in the Royal Navy.
Yes.
I was never in the Royal Navy.
Oh, no, it was in the
The
middle.
Royal Navy
All my
was in
family
Pete.
were, my brothers and sisters were, but not me.
Pete, you
Oh,
fell for
well.
that hook,
Why, you
line, and
free
sinker.
spirit.
Right.
I was in the Merchant Navy.
Yay.
We went to sea. That's what I keep telling my brothers and sisters. They were in the Royal Navy, but I went to sea.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic job.
Yeah.
Fantastic. We appreciate it.
I went all over the world. By the time I was 18, I'd even been to New York.
Oh,
Good Lord.
And he went to Vladivostok as well. So
We were actually in New Jersey, and we wanted to get the train into New York. And we were at Perth Amboy, and we got a taxi to the station, and the taxi driver said, "Gosh, you guys don't have to talk good English for a bunch of Norwegians." I said, "We're not Norwegian. We're British." He said, "What? On a ship with a name like that?" We was on the Van Daff.
oh, that was good. Landau.
Yep.
oh my
Yeah,
God.
he thought it was
Oh, I thought
Norwegian.
it was something else. Oh, beg your pardon.
God. Yeah.
Oh,
right.
just cold nap. I thought cold nap was Scandinavian. Is that correct?
Oh,
And that cold means sheltered.
oh.
No, it was coal. COAL, coal.
Oh, was it?
Coal nap was in coal.
Yeah,
Oh.
Home is Norwegian or
Coal.
Scandinavian.
Oh, right.
Home, yeah,
Home, yeah.
meaning
But
Estuary
coal nap,
Island.
exactly.
Yeah,
coal
I'm
nap.
sure I read that somewhere.
Yeah, hopefully you'll find it one day. On
Yes.
that note, what we're going to do, is there any other questions from Kathy, Kate, Richard, and or Peter?
Nope.
No.
Yeah, the only thing that's come up,
Quickly.
I thought, is of course you've got Welsh as well, you know. I mean, in historic terms, Welsh was foreigner, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes,
So-
yes, and Cornwall was Western foreigner.
So, you know, we want
Cornwallian, yeah.
somebody does linguistics. I know there's people who do it, and they know far more than we do about
That was
Yeah.
the Anglian name for it.
Anglia, you know.
Well,
Language.
Wales was Cymru,
Yeah, so
Cornwall was Kerno.
Oh, right.
Exactly.
And it was the Angrians
Oh,
that called it
Curnow.
Wales
Now I
and
know
Cornwall.
Curnow family.
Yep.
Exactly.
Curnow. Yeah.
On that note, folks, I'm going to go because I better
Alright.
get on my move.
They would have been speaking Brythonic, wouldn't they, before the Romans came?
Yes.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
even after, of course.
Yes.
They
Yes.
were using the
So it's-
Celtic languages in,
Yes.
and the Celtic language are very similar to Welsh, Cornish, Northern Italian, Basque,
Galicia.
and Brittany.
Oh, Basque. That's where my daughter is now.
Is she?
She's in Basque, San Sebastian.
Oh, lovely.
All right.
And they,
That's another part of the Celtic nations.
yes, yes, it's
He's just trying to wind me up. Somebody's mentioned online Baron Badger, right? What's going on here exactly? That's what I want to know. Right. Okay then. What I'm going to do, obviously, those who are taking part tonight, Richard and Anne, it's 7:15. And what we're going to do, we will be starting next week at 11 o'clock. Hopefully, Ruth will be back. So it's good to have Anne with us. Is there anything else anyone wants to say before we finish now?
No.
Just great to see everybody.
yes,
see
it is
everybody.
nice to see some new faces for me, anyway.
Oh, and nice to have you, another victim. Ha, 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 ha.
Victims we know so well, shines like
I'll
a
see you
bell,
next
but
week,
just
and
himself.
I'll see you tonight. Okay.
See you next week,
Yes,
guys.
now.
Cheers.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
Bye, lovely.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Night. See you soon. Bye-bye. And a partridge in a pear tree. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Anyone watching this, we had a lot of banter at the end there, and hopefully that was useful for somebody watching. Thank you very, very